Hey, welcome to Guitar Knobs, the guitars, gear, noise, and nonsense podcast, hosted today by these knobs.
Tony Dudzik, Pick Guardian.
Jared Brandon 1 pickups.
Hey, this is me, Todd Novak. We are super thrilled that you are along for this ride of the Guitar Knobs podcast. We love doing this. We're very happy to be all together in the same little room in our little studio, talking about guitar stuff with and for you. On the line, we've got somebody very special.
Hi, this is Scott Baxendale, and I own Baxendale Guitar in Athens, Georgia.
Woohoo!
Yes, and I met Scott at his shop in Athens, Georgia, while visiting Nick Greer. And Nick said, "Hey, have you ever heard of this dude?" And I said, "No, I don't believe I have." And he says, you gotta go meet this dude." And we went over and met him, and it was fantastic. And I walked in, and it was like a giant candy store. And we'll get into what all that means shortly. Yeah. It's going to be amazing.
But first,
hey, what do we do on the show, everybody?
we talk about stuff.
What kind of stuff?
Well, like
Guitars.
electrical guitars.
Okay.
And amplifier devices.
Specifically,
And
you.
we interview small boutique builders or sometimes the bigger ones, and we talk about what they do and how they got started. And we also talk about pedals a lot.
Yeah.
Which is good.
Yep, and amps and all kinds of stuff.
And pickguard makers.
And yeah, well, we did that one time.
And ephemera.
Yeah, and ephemera.
I love ephemera.
Yes,
That's right.
So yes, we are the champion of the small builder, so to speak.
right.
Yes.
And we have been since day one, and we're dang proud of that. So
Yep.
It's a good place to be.
It really is. It's an exciting place to be. That's where all the interesting stories happen, just like the one we're going to hear tonight. So let's talk about really quick. Well, first of all, if you are listening and you have the capability to go to Baxendale Guitar, that's BAXENDALE, and then guitars, right?
Yeah, no S on guitars, just
No S,
singular.
just singular. Baxendale Guitar. Go to check it out. Go to the Instagram and check out what he's posting. They've got a really, really active Instagram, and I think you're going to be really excited about what you see.
Yeah, the Instagram page is called harmony_conversions, and also Scott Baxendale Music. So that'd be what you can find us on Instagram.
Excellent. Yes.
Yeah.
He mentioned the Harmony and K, and just a little hint of what we're talking about tonight. Scott basically converts and restores all those old awesome Harmony and K and Silvertone style guitars that we see at guitar shows and on Craigslist and everything. We say, man, that looks like such a cool guitar, but man, that thing's gonna play like garbage.
That's
and
right.
he fixes that and makes
right.
it play awesome. And I know because I got to handle one myself. And
They
it was
look
amazing.
super cool, but like
Plus, we improve the sound quite a bit too.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. So we're going to talk about all that good stuff later, soon. Not so much later, sooner than later.
Sooner than later.
Yes, indeed. Tony Baloney, what's going on in your music world this week?
Let's see. Well, last time I think we talked about I ordered up that Phantom Guitar Works Phantom 6, and it arrived yesterday, and it was just phenomenal.
Cool.
I got it in. The seller it had a very good description. The photos he sent matched with what I had. And just as a reminder, this was a mid 90s, as I found out from the guy that started Phantom Guitar Works, who was the guitar player in Quarter Flash.
Whoa.
I'm going to harden my heart.
Yeah, that's a great song.
But anyhow, I found it really interesting because as I was doing a little research on this, so the story is that Vox had made JMI/Vox had made a Phantom, which is like the 5-sided kind of an oddball shaped thing. Then they also made a teardrop one that Brian Jones played.
Right.
And they made those pretty much through the 60s, and in 69 they stopped. And their trademark ran out.
Mm-hmm.
So they no longer owned it.
Oh,
And then
silly boys.
And then Phantom Guitar Works came along and in the early 90s started making them using those same shapes as the headstock as well as the body shapes.
Yep.
They actually applied for trademarks for both the body shapes and the headstocks and received them from the U.S. Patent Office.
Wow.
Then Vox, owned by Korg at this time now, decided they were going to release them. And they didn't. They thought that, well, since we made them in the '60s, we can make them now.
Yeah.
So they tried to put a lawsuit against Phantom Guitar Works, and they said, look at what we got.
Yeah.
You guys let it run out. And so they've been pretty successful in defending their Phantom Guitar Works has been successful in defending their trademarks because there's a lot of you can see them coming from overseas and things like that, and they've been able to protect it pretty strongly, and they've even fended off Korg, which is a monster corporation now.
Sure.
But I thought that was kind of cool, and that's it's another one for the little guy.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yes.
That's I can't wait to see that thing in person because I really like that body style. I think the headstock's kind of wacky. I'm not really a fan of that, but
That's what they use.
I know, but I do like the body style. Scott, are you a fan of the old that old body style?
I'm not a big fan of the headstock either myself.
Yeah, there you go. So that's 2 against 1, Tony.
Yeah, well, I'll take you both on. Put them up.
Scott, how about you? What's going on in your music world?
Well, I just spend a lot of time at the shop, but when I'm not at the shop, I've built a really nice little recording studio in my house, and I just work on little music projects. I work on recording acoustic guitar a lot, and I do some mixing and stuff like that, and working on some songwriter projects with some friends.
Nice.
Nothing too serious, but I like doing it, and I'm trying to get more involved in it as I trying to not work quite as hard on guitars as I have the last 10 years.
Well, you shouldn't have to because you have a small army over there.
Yeah, we got like 10 guys over there right now, which is pretty amazing.
Like full time. Nobody was
Seriously?
standing around. Yeah, everybody was working on guitars. It was awesome.
It's buzzing over there.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
And maybe what's maybe even more impressive is if I can, elaborate a little bit on this, at least to my knowledge, I mean, you're actually teaching a lot of these people how to do it.
Well, everyone there has gone through my school first before, and some of the guys that are there are still going through the school, but over half the guys have already graduated and they're working on customer work now. Like the students, they don't work on customer guitars. They just work on projects I give them until they achieve a certain skill level and then they slowly start working on customer stuff as they advance their skill level.
Like retarring the roof and stuff.
Making coffee runs.
They work on banjos. They work on banjos until they've earned their keep, and then they move up from there.
The banjo.
Nice.
The sexiest of all instruments.
Well, you know what we say at the shop, you know what you call perfect pitch, right? It's when you throw a banjo into a dumpster and it takes out a cello on the way in.
There you go.
My favorite thing I've ever seen, and you'll appreciate this as you're from Georgia, is the bumper sticker that I saw was "Paddle faster, I hear banjo music."
Yeah,
exactly.
Funny. Cool.
I think that's a Deliverance reference.
That would be a Deliverance reference.
Yes.
Jared, how about you, buddy?
Well, Zachary came over today. We hung out a little bit and kind of caught up.
Is Zach feeling better now?
He is feeling better. He's been kind of under the weather lately, and feeling better. Came over, and I said, Zach, I love the way my '79 Les Paul Custom plays, but my 1970 Les Paul Custom, it's got kind of smaller frets, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't cut your fingernails, then you just feel like you're digging into that ebony.
I hate that.
You feel like you're digging into the ebony fretboard, and it's like,
Ugh.
what the hell am I going to do here? What am I going to do? I thought,
I think you should cut your fingernails anyways. They're
yeah.
long.
Yeah. Come on,
I mean, I keep mine pretty trim, but that drives me up the wall if I hit a guitar with it and my fingernails.
They're just trying to be dumb.
Well, I can explain why that problem exists.
Well, they're smaller frets, and
they're the fretless wonder frets, and they're shaped like a T. There's no like crown on them. They're just like, if you look at from the end, it looks like a T. and it's just like the flattest, tiniest fret. There's no crown whatsoever on it at all.
Well,
I still have some of the old Fretless Wonder fret wire from when I was a Gibson warranty service guy from years ago.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
So what do you do? Just kind of use bigger strings or what?
No, it was really designed for a person who played with like 8 or 9 gauge strings and played with almost no left hand pressure, just really light technique.
like
Oh,
Angus
wow.
Young.
You know, it was for Les Paul, and if you ever watch how he plays, he played with just barely touched the strings. You know, with his left hand was kind of messed up anyway from his car wreck,
Yeah.
and he played so fast, and you can tell he's just barely. I mean, he barely has to touch a string to fret it. You know, it's just like so light action.
So when you do a refret on something like that kind of guitar, obviously the desire is to keep it as true to the actual vintage that it is, I would assume.
Not necessarily.
Well, that's what I said. I assume.
Honestly, in most cases, people want me to change the frets into normal frets. So
That's what I was
more
wondering.
often than
Yeah.
not, I'm converting it to standard frets.
A refret destroys any kind of true vintage value.
No.
But if you make it a more playable instrument, then do it.
Yeah.
If you do the refret right, I beg to find somebody who could even tell that it's been refretted
Yeah.
if you do it correctly.
Well,
And so, I mean, obviously, you know, I get that a lot with like vintage guitars, and people will say, well, it's got the original frets in it. And I go, well, do you want to play it or do you want to look at it? You know?
exactly.
If you want to
it's
use
not
it,
that
and
bad, you know,
if you do the fret job correctly, and if you use the authentic wire and all that kind of stuff, really, it's almost virtually impossible to tell that's been refretted when it's done.
So when it comes to like the on the binding and the little nubs that stick out, do you normally take those down, or do you just like cut the frets to fit within the
I've done it both ways. You know, the nubs are a big debate. Some people hate the nubs and some people like them. I happen to love the nubs because what the nubs do, they prevent any sharp fret ends, and they prevent any issues where the high E string will get hooked up underneath the fret where it's lifted up on the corner.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
And you never have any sharp fret ends on the edge of the neck with the nubs. And so when I build my custom guitars with bound necks, I put the nubs on them and do it that way. And it takes longer to make because you have to put binding on the side of the neck and have it come up to the top of the fret. And then you have to carve the binding away in between the frets.
Yeah.
And we actually made a fingerboard like that today at the shop. And then when you have those nubs, then you dress the ends of the nubs just like they were the ends of the frets.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're doing a vintage Les Paul that has the nubs, there's a couple ways of doing it. And the best way is if you can take the binding off and then put the frets in with the binding off and then reattach the binding and have the nubs match up.
Yeah.
Other cases, the nubs get worn down and you can recreate the nubs because the vintage binding that's made out of cellulose nitrate, it'll dissolve in acetone. And so you can kind of fuse it back together. It'll melt it back together and stuff. And so you can kind of make new nubs out of some binding dissolved in acetone that creates a new nub. And if you do it right, you can make it where you can't even tell.
Wow.
And so there's a few little tricks to get around all that.
I like me some acetone.
And if it was like a 70s or 80 Les Paul that wasn't, it was more of a player and less of a collector's piece. Normally I would just flatten the nubs and just refret it like a normal guitar without the nubs too. And I've done it all the different ways.
Nice.
Yeah, in my case, with my guitar, it's in pretty good shape. It's original condition. The frets aren't like worn down. It's not the case. It's just the
factory
fretless
frets.
wonder.
It's just the fretless wonder.
So in that case, I'm just going to leave it as it is. And
Try putting nines on it and setting it up really light and just play it with a different technique when you play it and just try a
what it
different
has down now, yeah.
playing approach.
Yeah.
And just try, use a tiny pick and barely touch the strings and try to do lots of sweeps and stuff like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say on that, but it is a different playing technique.
It is,
And that-
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
Or raise the nut and play it as a slide guitar.
Yeah, why not?
Or just refret it with the frets you like to play and just play it.
Jeez. Oh, Todd, what's
Yes?
going on in your musical world this
I
week?
had I just spent the night before last. I I realized, I was like, gee whiz, I haven't changed the strings on the 2 of my band guitars in dang near a year, which normally I would.
Did you get a tetanus shot?
No, I mean they were still in really good shape. They weren't blown out or anything.
They don't play them enough.
SIT, dude, I play them like all week long.
And they actually stayed in tune?
They were, they honestly, I was shocked.
Do you boil them?
I didn't boil them. I didn't do anything. The only reason I had to change them, and I was still getting great harmonics on them and everything, but I just changed them because I said, it's been a while. I should probably change them. So I'm just vouching like those are I like them strings. But switched those out, and it was nice. I was just down in the basement changing out the strings on the Hagstrom Viking and the Les Paul Special, and watching a little Andy Griffith. Yeah, I love Floyd the Barber. He's so funny. I love Floyd. Anyways.
Hey, the Darlings were on that show, and that included
yes,
Clarence White, who was who invented country rock, was in that band. Clarence and Roland White, the 2 brothers, were in that band.
Yeah.
The Darlings were
the
great.
Darlings, and they were like 15 years old then.
Yeah.
And then Clarence White went on to be in the Flying Burrito Brothers after that.
That's right.
Yeah.
Remember that?
They made
I knew Roland White when I lived in
too.
Nashville. I knew Roland White there. He used to come in the shop when I was at Gruen's.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wish I would have been able to meet Floyd. I like Floyd the Barber. But anyways.
The Barber.
Hey, let's talk about some pedals.
Woohoo! 1, 2, 3. 4 on the floor.
Okay, Scott from Baxendale Guitars. Why don't you give us your 4 on the floor?
All right. Well, my first pedal of choice is an old green TS9 Tube Screamer that I bought new probably in 1993, maybe.
My man.
And
I love those.
It's been my number 1 pedal ever since. I can't imagine being without it. I find that it gives me a little more presence and punch. It just gives some natural compression and just puts it right in the mix where I'd like to be. And if I set it right, it allows me to basically control my clean and dirty settings for the most part with just my volume control. So nice. That's my first pedal. And
now,
then
is that when you got that, what made you get that pedal in the first place?
Stevie Ray Vaughan, probably.
Well, most,
not long before that, like in the late 80s, I got to meet Stevie Ray Vaughan in the recording studio, and I actually got to play his number 1 59 Strat through his rig in the studio during the time he was recording Cold Shot.
Holy moly.
And it was a pretty cool evening just that night, meeting him and getting to do that. And he couldn't have been a nicer guy. He was just as coolest guy you could ever meet.
Wow. And
he just handed me his guitar and let me play through his rig while he was in the studio. And it was just really nice. And of course, that was kind of a central piece of his pedals was the green Tube Screener. Of course, I think he had the older one with the square button on it. And I had the first reissue version of it.
Oh, you mean the little square button?
Yeah. With the TS 505 or something like that. Yeah.
Wow.
Which hat was he wearing?
I don't know. I can't remember that.
That's a true test of memory.
Yes.
That sounds pretty remarkable.
I don't remember.
But he had a big plexiglass shield in front of his amps that he had, and he had 6 or 7 amps all hooked up together.
Oh my
a couple
God.
Blackface Supers and some Tweed amps, Tweed Deluxes and stuff like that. And they were all kind of stacked all together, and he had these big plexiglass shields in front of him.
Yeah, he probably had him
And
dying
when
too.
And I took a guitar that I made, and he was playing that first before I played his guitar. And he plugged that guitar I made into his rig, and he goes, "Hey man, I wouldn't stand there if I were you. You need to move over here."
He said, what?
It was loud.
Yeah, that's cool. Very cool.
He was cool. That was a great night. And I have Buddy Guy to thanks for that night, too, because the reason I met Stevie Ray was because I was at a show with Buddy Guy, and I was in the green room with him, and Stevie Ray called him up on the phone, and I was standing right next to him, and he wrote the phone number down on a piece of paper, and I just memorized it and went across the street and called him up and told him I had some guitars I wanted to show him, and he invited me out to the studio.
Wow.
That's
There
using
you
your
go.
noggin, man.
Yeah. Resourceful.
So I got to meet Buddy Guy and Stevie Ray on the same night.
Wow.
Pretty cool.
That's mighty cool, man.
Yeah.
What do you have for number 2?
Number 2 is a Nick Greer pork and beans pedal.
Oh, yeah.
And I like that mid boost, and I use it in conjunction with the tube screamer a lot. Like the tube screamer sort of just like gives me my basic tone where I kind of set the gain on like 6, and I get the distortion on like 5 or 6, and the treble and the tone on about like 11 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
And then that just sort of feeds everything else. And then so I go into the pork and beans pedal, and then I use that when I want to like kick it into high gear on top of the tube screamer. And
Nick makes some great stuff, man.
He makes great stuff. I like all his stuff that he makes. It's all bulletproof and it all works great.
When I was out there visiting you guys, I had just picked up the Southland drive.
Yes,
which I've been playing around with and trying to figure out like whenever you get a new pedal, especially a drive, you're like, now where does this go? Here? No.
Yeah.
Here? No. Here? Maybe. Here? Yes.
he's got the nuance of distortion down to like a science.
Oh,
man.
yeah.
He just he'll go off and tell you about the mechanics behind why this distortion does this and that one does that. And it just blows my mind.
Yep. Yeah. And it's also worth mentioning that his Super Chief, that little 3-watt wonder, don't even need distortion. It's just
I was just going to mention that. I just got one of those 2 weeks ago, and I've been reamping tracks through it in my studio. It's ridiculous.
Incredible.
It's ridiculous. Yes.
Really, really incredible. People out there listening, if you are in the market for a small amp that has a colossal amount of attitude, and can also like roll off into nice cleans, I mean, you would be hard pressed to find a better one out there.
That's right. It's incredible.
Yeah. What do you have for number 3?
Number 3 is a Korg G4 rotating speaker simulator.
Ooh,
Cool.
And I've had that pedal since the 90s. And the only reason I ever bought that pedal was because of Warren Haynes, actually. And when I lived in Nashville and worked at Gruen's, my best friend in Nashville was Alan Woody, who played bass with Government Mule and Allman Brothers. He didn't then when we were best friends. It was after that. And so it was around the time that Government Mule was really starting to get into high gear that I was able to meet them one time with Warren. And he showed me this pedal, and I couldn't believe how closely it simulated the Leslie with, especially if you use 2 amps with it. And so I've had one ever since, and I haven't really found a Leslie simulator that I thought was any better than this one. And it kind of has all the parameters of a Leslie 122 on it. You can vary the spread of the microphones, and you can vary the speed.
Ooh,
you can
that's
vary how
cool.
fast.
Varying the spread of the microphones.
Yeah, it's like got like an emulation of the upper rotor and the lower rotor microphones, and you can vary the stereo spread of that. And you can, and if you feed it through 2 amps and spread the amps a few feet apart, man, it moves the air, and it's like the closest thing I think to the real thing that I've actually ever used. And I used to have a Roto Vibe, and I've had some other ones.
And what make is that?
It's a Korg makes it. They don't make it anymore. But
Okay.
Yeah. It was made back in the 90s. They had a series of pedals that all kind of looked on the same footprint with the same array of buttons, but they were different colors. And this one looks like it's kind of chocolate brown and looks like it looks like a Leslie cabinet with little drawings on it. And so
That's cool.
Yeah. And so I use that. And then my 4th pedal after that is a toss-up between a delay pedal, which I use for certain types of gigs, and a wah-wah pedal, which I use for other types of gigs.
Ooh, you got to pick one.
All right. Well, it'd be the delay pedal because I use that more often.
All right.
And I'm not happy with the one I have now, and I'm on the lookout for a new one. And I'm actually looking at a guy's bringing a carbon copy in on Monday for me to look at.
Oh, that's been on the show many times. People have selected that as one of their 4 on the floor quite often. The carbon copy is one of those ones that just like
They got it right.
It'll work.
Well, a lot of the gigs I play now, I'm playing my Silvertone 1446, which is a hollow body guitar with a Bigsby on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm doing a lot of like Tex-Mexy kind of surfy, vibrato-y kind of stuff. And to just have that kind of slapback echo in there, it's kind of essential
Sure.
to get that kind of sound. And especially if I'm doing this like especially with the Bigsby, where I'm doing long sustaining stuff, which I'm getting kind of into lately. That the Echo lends itself. So I use that a lot more than the wah-wah these days.
There you go. That is a solid 4 on the floor, my man.
It's a good
Thanks.
Yeah, with a little surprise with the speaker.
That's right.
That's kind of fun.
I'll have to track one of those down.
one. Yeah, I want to hear what that sounds like. It's got me intrigued.
Yes. We are all intrigued over here. Look at us being
Nice.
intrigued.
Intrigued.
Okay, everybody. We are going to discuss with Scott what is up with his whole thingamabob in the guitar world. If you have not had a chance yet, let me remind you to check out Baxendale Guitar, BAXENDALE guitar.com, and Harmony and K / conversions?
Underscore
conversions. Oh,
Yeah, on
I almost got
Instagram.
it right.
On Instagram.
Yeah.
And there's Baxendale Guitar on Facebook too. You can go there.
Yeah. So go and check that out, and so you can have a little bit of reference of what we're talking about. But as I mentioned before, I was down in Georgia visiting my folks, and made my way down to Athens to go visit Nick. And we walked over to which they share the same parking lot, so they're literally buddies right next to each other, next door neighbors.
Yeah.
And I walked into the shop, and I was greeted by your lovely wife, and
Pam.
Pam, yes.
Yeah.
And I immediately saw past her to see a huge stack of Harmony and K, style guitars, and I was like, wait a minute, what's this? And Nick didn't give me really a whole lot of pretense. He just said, let's go check it out. Which you quickly ushered me into the front playing room, and I'm a fan of these old guitars. I really like them, but I have not played one that hasn't played like doo doo. Like I'm just gonna be honest, And I walk in, and you had a showroom of all the ones you've refinished, and that was an absolute treat just to look at them. And you just started picking up all kinds of ones and telling me about it, and it was just great. So I figured, we don't do a lot of acoustic guitar stuff on this show, simply because I'm just not as familiar with that entire world, and I'm just more comfortable in the lane that I'm in. But these ones in particular, I think people that typically play the kind of stuff that we do, the kind of instruments and the kind of music and all that stuff, do gravitate towards these style guitars. And we're familiar enough with them, but I just really liked the idea of what you were doing. So let's get deep into that.
All right.
Can you just give us the elevator of what you do, and then we're going to back up and we'll get way deep into it. But just give me the kind of quick reference on it.
Well, basically, I've created this process where we take an old department store guitar, and Harmony and K were two companies in Chicago that built guitars for every department store in the country from around just after World War I up into the mid 70s. And all through those years, every department store like Sears and Roebuck or J.C. Penney or Montgomery Ward's or Western Auto, they all had music departments where they sold guitars, and where they got those guitars were from Harmony or K, and they could have their own name printed on them. For instance, if it says Silvertone on it, that just means it was sold through Sears. Or if it says Airline on it, that means it was sold through Montgomery Ward's. And they could be the identical guitar just with the two different names on the headstock, and that just means they were sold in different stores is all. And so there's millions of these guitars made, and from my generation, and I was born in 1954 and grew up in the late 60s and the 70s. This was my generation, basically. But we all grew up with these guitars as the beginner guitar that we had and the beginner guitar that every kid bought. Just something happened when I was in Denver, Colorado, where my son decided he wanted to learn how to fix guitars, and I had 3 or 4 of them laying around, and I just thought, well, why don't I teach you how to work on guitars, and we'll just take this old Harmony apart, because it's already half fallen apart anyway. So let's just take it the rest of the way apart. and then we'll put it back together. And then in the context of one guitar, you're going to be doing a neck reset, and you're going to do a plane and refret, and you're going to make a new bridge, and you're going to figure out the neck angle and the playing geometry, and you're going to make a new nut and make a new saddle and do all that stuff. And so just in the context of working on this one cheap guitar, department store guitar, you're going to cover all these bases in guitar repair that will occur every guitar that comes in the shop, in terms of the fretwork and the nuts and the bridges and stuff. And so I thought, what could be a better teaching tool to teach my son how to work on guitars than that? And so after we did like 2 or 3 of them, we started to realize, oh, hey, these things sound pretty good and they play pretty good. And so we just hung them up on the wall, and they kind of just started selling themselves. So we started getting a little bit more into it, and then we started finding cooler models and different models that were interesting. And so it just sort of expanded from there. At the same time this was going on, I was sort of expanding my luthier school. I was teaching this repair skills and how to work on guitars. And again, these cheap Harmony and K guitars, which essentially they're built just like Martins and Gibsons. So when you learn and make all your mistakes on a $10 Harmony, then after you master the skills, then you can start working on the expensive, valuable guitars. And so I just sort of saw these as guitars that would just, be practice guitars basically for your repair skills. Mm-hmm. But the results turned out so good. And when we first started doing this, I noticed when you're in the shop, we have a bunch of the little 3/4 Stellas and the cheapest guitars they made with the painted binding and stuff. And for the first 5 or 6 years or so that I was doing these rebuilding, we didn't even touch those guitars because we didn't think the wood was good enough to be worth it. Mm. And then at some point I had so many students and I didn't have enough guitars that we just started rebuilding those too. And then realized that, these things sound just about as good as the ones with the mahogany on them, and so we realized that they made millions of these inexpensive guitars. And so I began to realize that, wow, not only are these guys learning how to, do professional neck resets and professional refrets and stuff by working on these guitars, but the guitars are turning into such great guitars. And then I started realizing about the environmental aspect of it and the green tech aspect that was happening, because as when I first started my first rebuilding of the Harmonies with my son maybe 15 years ago, that was right when they first made Brazilian rosewood an endangered species. And since that time they've made Honduras mahogany, and all the rosewoods are now considered endangered species, including Indian rosewood now. Started thinking it was, well, I'm taking these old guitars made with this cheap wood, and some of the wood's not so cheap, like the mahogany guitars have really nice wood in them. But I'm taking these guitars and repurposing this old wood, and then taking the crude insides out and putting sophisticated design insides in them so they have the professional grade tone and sound. And so I began to see what an amazing green tech thing I was doing. And so now, between the school and the teaching and then this whole aspect, it's really starting to explode.
It's such a great story, just, again, kind of stumbling into something that is really impactful and is completely unique. Hopefully I get this right, but I believe that when I was there, you were telling me that a lot of the tops of those old guitars were actually the same woods that Gibson. It was like the Gibson wood or
they were buying a lot of that wood, I think, from Martin's sawmill.
Martin, yeah,
because Martin had a sawmill, and they would sell wood to other manufacturers and stuff. And I think a lot of the mahogany and spruce and stuff you see on these guitars that were made in the 40s and the early 50s and the late 50s, up to the late 50s, like from the late 30s up to the late 50s. The woods in all those guitars is spectacular. It's way better than the wood that's in new Martins, for the most part, or new boutique guitars. And, and being not in acoustic guitars, maybe you haven't heard this term so much, but now in the acoustic world is this whole thing about having torrefied wood. And torrefication is a process where it's a process that happens naturally to wood, but it's also a process that you can do
in a big oven.
You can be done. Yeah. And it's a process that was originally designed for stabilizing wood to make big doors in like big cathedrals and stuff.
Oh.
And so and this goes back like 200-300 years, this process where they take the wood and basically bake it in an oven until all the moisture is completely baked out of it at a certain temperature. And then it makes the wood extremely stabilized. And
is that the same thing as tempering or, it's not tempered, that's glass, but like the kind of wood you put on decks and stuff.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like that. Yeah, it's
stuff
like it's more like tempering, actually.
Okay,
in a way when you think about it, because basically, what happens, like here's the reason why. Mainly the reason why Chinese acoustic guitars that are made by the millions basically all suck. And so when they cut down a tree now to make guitars with, they cut it down and they cut it all up and they put it in a vacuum kiln, basically, where they suck the moisture out really fast, and they bring the wood to a certain moisture content, which is about 7%. And once they get the moisture content level of the wood to 7%, that's considered stable. And that allows the wood to take in moisture and release moisture so it can survive in all different environments. And humidity is kind of the biggest thing with wood, because wood acts like a sponge where it sucks in moisture and it expands it and stuff like that. And so when they force dry the wood really fast like this, what happens is the wood does act like a sponge, where when you get in a humid environment, it sucks the moisture into the wood and it swells it up. And then when it dries, it releases it and shrinks back out. And these guitars, and it's not just the Chinese guitars, but a lot of the American made guitars, a lot of new Martins are like this. A lot of new guitars are like this, where the first few years you have the guitar, unless you maintain strict humidity control over the guitar, you risk cracking it just every time you take it out, basically. And when I lived in Colorado, and being a Martin warranty service center out there, I was just had this happen all the time. Every day, a person would buy a guitar at Guitar Center on Saturday and go up to Aspen, and then by Thursday, the guitar had 3 cracks in the top where it just shrunk
Rocky
all up.
Mountain.
Right. And so torrefication is the thing where they take the wood and bake it in an oven, and they do all this stuff to take the moisture out where it can't do that anymore and stabilizes it.
Uh-huh.
And wood naturally torrefies on its own. Like, that's the reason old guitars don't have this issue where they shrink up and swell up, and where if you're on tour and you're in Georgia this week and in Colorado next week, you don't go out to Colorado and the fret ends are cutting the edges of your fingers where the neck shrunk and stuff like that, because old guitars have shrunk and expanded 50, 60 years through seasons and stuff. And so the wood is stabilized completely. And so with these old Harmonies and Ks, that wood's so stable that after we rebuild them, you don't have any of those kind of issues when you're traveling. And so a lot of people that are on tour love them because they're bulletproof out on tour, because they can go all around the world and not have playability issues when they go from dry to humid or hot to cold,
And they've been stabilized not only from a humidity standpoint, but from a bracing standpoint and a neck standpoint and all that stuff. Hey, can you talk about that a little bit more?
Well, I'll just explain the process. So we get a guitar, and what we'll do is we'll take the bridge off and the pick guard and all that stuff, and we'll take the neck off. And then after we get the body, we'll take the back off. And if it's got binding on it, first we'll carefully take the binding off. And then once we get the binding off, we can separate the back and take the back off. And so then once we have what we call the shell, once we have it opened up, we clean out all the internal bracing inside of it and then clean up the inside of the guitar. And we take off the back bracing and the top bracing. And then if there's any kind of structural issues, like say it's got a crack or say one of the seams is loose or it could be anything, we'll fix all that stuff while it's apart because we can clamp it all up really solid in our forms and stuff. And so there's no issues with it being misclamped or misaligned with any cracks, and it gets really stabilized. And then we take and put our tuned proprietary scalloped X bracing inside, and it's based on a design that's a hybrid between a mid-30s Martin design and a mid-30s Gibson design, and then kind of my own design as it's slowly evolved over the last 30 years. that I've been doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a scalloped X bracing, and it's not anything entirely unique. But I learned some things about the 30s Martins that separates them from the others Martins, that I think I discovered some things about the design that really separate my design apart from another traditional X design, for instance, in terms of having full balance and the perfect kind of tone.
And then to the necks, you're doing some things in the necks, yes?
Right. So after the body's all back together, we will take the neck, and a lot of people ask me, go, well, is it better to get one with the adjustable truss rod? And I say, no, it's not, because the necks, once we take the neck and we pull all the frets out, and then we plane them out on a belt sander, like on a big table sander, and we get the neck really straight, and then we re-radius the fingerboard at the same time we straighten the neck. But once we've done all that, the neck has done all the warping and twisting it's going to, sitting in the closet for the last 50 years under string tension, or being in the garage or wherever. And so once we've stabilized them, we've almost hardly ever have neck issues with them. Every once in a while we'll have to reset a neck that's pulled up or something, but we hardly ever have any playability issues because of the neck relief, or the fact that, has a rod in it or doesn't have a rod in it or something like that.
And most of those ones obviously don't have truss rods in them.
The 30s and 40s don't have rods in them. The 50s have non-adjustable rods in them, and the 60s have adjustable rods.
Okay.
But here's the thing about the adjustable rods is we don't adjust them, because half the time they're so rusted on there, you try to adjust them and the nut breaks off in your hand, and then you have to replace the truss rod, which is a lot harder job. And so, and also once we straighten them and do all our thing, you don't have to adjust them. So it's kind of a moot point.
Cool. Good.
And I actually think the best sounding ones are the early 50s ones that have the non-adjustable kind of steel reinforced rods in them.
Is that like a T-bar or?
In those, it's just a round rod.
Okay.
The Martins had T-bars in them, but the Harmonies it's a round steel rod.
Huh.
Yeah. Interesting.
It's kind of like a double stacked rod, so that it's kind of vertical stacked, so it has some like resistance. It's like folded over on itself, kind of.
Okay.
One of the I noticed that you were using some very interesting ways to actually stabilize some of the bracings, and I know that you on your Instagram you've got many pictures of this, almost like a natural tension. So you're not putting like a million clamps on the bracings. You're actually using sort of distributed weight. You have these all exactly cut, very long but pliable, bendable sticks.
Right.
That you go ahead. Yeah, please.
Yeah,
you'll do it better than I will.
It's called a go bar deck. And so we've got the body apart, and we have the back off, and we have the top. Well, we can lay the top down so we can flatten the inside of the top from the inside. And when we glue all our new braces in, but what it is the go bar deck is a flat table, and then it's got a roof on it that's maybe 3 foot above that. And so you have a bottom and a top. And then you have a bunch of sticks that are cut to different lengths, and these are actually made of redwood. And, if you go to the Guitar Luthier, the store, they'll sell these like kind of fiberglass, kind of tent pole type sticks, and to buy enough to do the kind of work we do, you're going to spend hundreds of dollars buying them. And we can just buy a redwood 2x4 and cut those up and shape our own sticks and use those. And that works just as well. Mm-hmm. And so we make our own sticks, and so anyway, the sticks are different lengths, and they correspond to different height braces and different types of guitars, and whether we're doing the back or the top and stuff like that. And so they're all color coded. So we'll have red sticks and green sticks and blue sticks, and each one indicates a different length. And that way, so some of the braces have peaks and scallops in them, so they're different heights when you're trying to glue them in. So they'll use different color sticks. And so if you could use standard clamps to glue all the new bracing and stuff in, but the clamps would be so heavy that if you torqued it a certain way, you could actually like damage the guitar, because the guitar itself is so fragile.
And the tops that you're working with, part of the beauty of some of those, you have really interesting paint schemes and patterns and illustrations and all kinds of things that, if you're not careful, those are gone.
That's true. That's true. We get a lot of, this has kind of been a relatively new thing with all these stenciled patterned cowboy guitars and stuff like that always have this like artistic designs and stuff on them. Those are something that early on we didn't really do very many of those, and now we've started to do a whole bunch of them. And that's true.
That's so
and
neat.
We're always trying to maintain the original patina. Like, we're not repainting them necessarily. Once in a blue moon we do, but generally we don't. And we try to maintain the original look. So if a guitar comes into us and it looks like it's been all beat up and the finish is all flaking off, and we'll rebuild it, and structurally it'll be new, but it'll still look all beat up and everything. And so it's sort of like, how Gibson and Fender and Martin are all making these fake relic guitars where they take these new tellies and whatever, and they scratch them all up and make them look like they're 50 years old. Well, this is kind of the opposite, where we're taking old beat up guitars and we're structurally rebuilding them new. And so we call them real relics.
Along those lines, one of the really neat things that I saw was some of these guitars that don't inherently have pickups. This isn't something that is so expensive that you can't sort of modify. And it looked like, I know that there was a couple that were being, played and tested that had pickups in them that didn't originally have pickups in them.
That's true. And that's a lot of the arch tops, and especially any of the Harmony and K arch tops, but they made a ton of these like inexpensive birch arch top guitars that don't really sound that great, but they're cool looking. And usually they're all busting apart at the seams and stuff. And so we'll take those all apart and rebuild them structurally. And those are the F-hole guitars. And there's only 2 braces inside a F-hole guitar. So there's not this like magic scallop proprietary bracing I can go put in them to make them transform the sound and make them sound 10,000 times better. Mm-hmm. But what we do is we go in and rebuild them structurally. And then we change the neck geometry so that that actually has a taller bridge, which is more like a Gibson style bridge, like archtop bridge. And that actually puts more drive on the top, which makes them sound better. But to top off that, we electrify them, and we could do that a couple ways. And one way is on the nicer ones, we'll make a Bakelite raised archtop pick guard, and mounted to that is a mini humbucker that mounts up at the neck, and then all the controls are on the pick guard. And so you can plug that in and play it through any kind of tube amp, and you can play it loud and distorted, or you can play it real jazzy, and it sounds really awesome.
They sounded fantastic.
So
it sounds fantastic.
So it's kind of like a Johnny Smith type model.
Yeah, it's more like a George Thorogood, but only not a thin body kind of guitar, and not a cutaway, kind of like sort of a blues, 50s blues, jump blues kind of archtop guitar or something.
Pretty clever.
And then on the cheaper ones that we sell these for like $800 or $900 out the door with ready to go, and you just plug in and rock. We'll just route a humbucker right in the top and put the controls right in the guitar, so it'll be kind of like an ES-125 basically.
Yeah, and they don't look silly either.
They don't look silly.
They look awesome.
We've got these cool retro vintage style radio knobs that we use on them. They look really good, and they're
all unique. That's the other thing. It's not like you have an assembly line of like, here's 15 guitars that look all the same. It's like every one of those things looks different.
Each one has its own special
they're
thing.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So we're right now. I would assume that the kind of music that's out right now is it feels like is really tapping into what you're doing. Have you seen like a huge amount of growth recently?
Well, we've been getting a lot of interest, we've getting some write-ups in some magazines and stuff. But I mean, it's just some of the things, like, for instance, Jim James has just started using one on his acoustic tour. Mm-hmm. And, we have Luther Dickinson and Buddy Miller and the Drive-By Truckers and Wilco and Butch Walker. And, the list goes on of these people that are using our guitars, and some of them are using them pretty extensively too. Mm-hmm. Nels Klein, his acoustic guitar is one of our rebuilds. Jeff Tweedy's got like 2 or 3 of them that we've done for him. And what we find, especially with the flat top guitars, is that they end up being in studios a lot because they record spectacularly. You know, they're just one of the best recording guitars ever.
They got their own sort of thing.
They've got their own thing, and they have kind of a natural compression where they mic really well because they're really balanced. They're not like tubby sounding, and they don't have like a lot of guitars. And I hate to drop names, but you know, guitars like Taylor's and some Breedloves and stuff like that, they kind of have this weird kind of hole in the mid range. And if we could get into the details of the bracing design, I could explain why that is. But what happens is they end up kind of sounding tinny or bright. They call it bright sounding, but what is it's just basically they're just missing a hole of a mid range that they're missing out, you know. Or they sound really bass heavy, and you have to roll the bass off on them to record them. You know, you just have to cut all that out when you record them.
The tinny kind of thing, it always reminds me of like when someone's plugged into an acoustic amp, or you have an acoustic kind of simulator thing going on. You can tell it's like coffee house guitar sound.
Oh, well, here's something I should tell your listeners, because since you guys have a lot of electric guitar guys, here is the best. And by a million miles, the best keep it simple, stupid way to mic your guitar, amplify your guitar to gig your acoustic guitar. Okay, and you can spend hundreds of dollars buying like a Baggs Paracoustic DI or some kind of proprietary acoustic box that has a million things on it. But the best thing ever is to get a tube mic preamp, and it can be as simple as a $50 ART tube MP that you can buy at Guitar Center for $50. And you substitute the direct box with this tube mic pre. And if you can afford a good one, if you can afford like an Avalon U5 or anything, you know, I have a DBX that costs $99 that I use, but it has to have a preamp tube in it. And then you just tell the guy at the gig, say, look, I'm going to use I have my own direct box where I'll use it, and you just substitute that for the direct box. And then the preamp has a pre-gain, a post-gain. It has a 20 dB pad and has a phase reversal switch on it. And it has phantom power, which you won't need. And it also has a 1/4 inch in, an XLR in, and a 1/4 inch and XLR out. So you plug the guitar in to the box. You take the XLR out to the PA, you get your monitors and your mains all set up with your direct signal. And then you take the 1/4 inch out and you run that into your electric guitar rig through your pedal board and everything. And then you mic that up, and then you have this option where you can use all your pedals and whatnot and split that and mix. And the house guy can blend that all in, you know, with the clean signal.
That's pretty clever.
But tube amp, and I'll put that on stage so I can sort of my personal monitor. And so I'll get my main set up and then do that. And then if you just add just enough slap echo just to kind of fill the room, it'll make your acoustic guitar just fill any room with the most present sound, full balanced present sound, without any fighting the drums or the bass or anything else or feedback or problems or anything like that. And every time you do that, the sound guy will say, "That's the best acoustic sound I've ever heard."
Oh, that's
and you can do it for You can do it for $50, you know, with an ART tube MP, and just eliminate all that extra EQ crap, you know, or stuff. I mean,
all right,
eliminate all that EQ stuff, extra EQ stuff.
So speaking of amplifying acoustics, do you get any requests for, you know, putting in a piezo bridge? Any of these old?
Probably over half of the rebuilds we do get some sort of transducer in them, and the two that we prefer is the K&K Pure Mini, which we put in a lot of guitars, and I recommend that for lower stage volume. And then we use the Fishman Matrix, which I recommend for higher stage volume. And in both of those cases, I recommend the tube preamp in the same exact method.
Wow, nice. Good to know. That's some helpful tips for a lot of folks.
And there are situations where a magnetic style pickup, like a Sunrise or something like that, works pretty good. Mm-hmm. And those can be effective in certain kind of, like, especially like big concert stages, like arena stages and stuff like that. Sometimes that magnetic pickup can be a little better, and that's just essentially like a hollow body electric guitar when you do have that pickup on there.
Sure. Cool, man. Well, I'm so glad you got to share your story with us and all about the guitars that you're making.
Thanks.
man, that was just such a cool shop to go see and see everybody upstairs working and just be like happy campers working on these old guitars. It's really neat. Yeah.
I want to see it.
It's a great shop.
Yeah, I want you all to come in and check it out.
Yeah, well, I'm sure we'll make it down there at some point in time. My folks are down there, so I'll stop in some other time for sure.
One thing I wanted to mention that, we were talking about me and Nick being in the same complex. That whole entire office complex is like a secret weapon in the art world, because you have us and you have Nick, but you also have Dave Barbie has his recording studio in there, and he records so many records in there, and has two studios in there actually. And then the Drive-By Truckers also have their offices and equipment warehouse in there. And, so you have just like this whole like collection of movers and shakers, I guess you might call them.
And it's really kind of in the middle. I mean, realistically, it is a bit in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, it's just on the edge of town, and it's incognito. There's no flash or fanfare.
No.
You couldn't even tell. There's nothing to indicate that Dave Barbie's studio's there. I mean, except a door that doesn't have any sign on it. So you'd have to know it's there. Yeah.
It's either going to be a great recording studio or like the best barbecue ever.
That's right.
Cool. Well, we're gonna get out of this thing here with a little bit of
Would You Rather. Okay, this week's Would You Rather. So, you broke your back carrying your drummer's drum stand bag, and you're recovering. But you want to play out, right? So you have to choose between two guitars that you can, sling over your shoulder all night long, and they're going to be very light. So, would you rather have a red Parker Fly? Okay.
Can we get more specific?
Or they're extremely light, by the way, and they're kind of.
Well, I'm assuming so. That's the whole.
All right. What's the or?
Or
extremely light, by the way.
A newer. Reissue, because I think they're much lighter than the original, a natural Telecaster thin line.
Oh, well, that's
a 69 or 72 style.
There's absolutely no question that it would be the Tele.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know how far this Would You Rather is going to go, but let's go.
Let's keep going.
Scott's got the thin line.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thin line for
Which
sure.
I need to know which style of thin line, the 69.
It wouldn't
No
matter
lighter
if it's a red Parker Fly. If the choice, it could be.
Well, okay, I'll give you that.
And let me tell you, from a technician's point of view, the Parker Fly had some of the coolest things and some of the dumbest things ever put in a guitar.
Yeah.
And I've never ever worked on a Parker Fly where the over thought out ribbon cable design on the electronics was not a complete disaster in the guitar, and I had to completely rewire it all, because as soon as the pot worked its way loose, it just destroyed the ribbon cable that held all the electronics, that connected all the electronics together, and it was terrible.
I didn't even know they had the proprietary ribbon thing. I know they had a lot of other proprietary stuff, which was
I've probably
the whole
50
thing.
Parker Flies I've had to completely rewire because of that.
Oh boy!
Well, maybe after you run out of harmonies and Ks, you can have a Parker Fly repair center.
I've built 50 tellies that I've built 50 tellies that I've loved every one of them. I've hated every Parker Fly I've ever had to fix.
All right, Tony.
Next.
I would prefer if it was a 69 style.
Well, of course.
Without the
I don't
want the wide range.
I don't care for those.
My custom Tele Coolie casters that I make are made like Tele thin lines, only there's no F hole in them, so they look like a solid body, but they're chambered.
Yeah.
They're real pretty awesome.
Cool.
Have you ever seen that? It's a Fender
with Waller
book.
pickups.
It was the prototype thin line that actually has like a spruce top with binding.
Well, I've seen that before, but I don't know if the one I saw was the prototype or not.
Yeah, it was in this. It's in this one really cool. I'll have to dig it out, but it's a really cool Fender book, and it's got some of the best photos of really oddball stuff. It's like my wish list book.
I played the all acrylic Stratocaster that was made for the trade show that back in the 1964 or 5 or whenever it was.
Oh, that had to be nice and light.
Yeah, that was like 20 pound Strat. Yeah.
Nothing worse than a 20-pound
Yeah.
Strat. No, so I'm going with the Telecaster.
All right,
I mean, there's just no reason to
With wide
even.
range.
Well, I would even go with one that has wide ranges over the Parker Fly.
There you go. Okay. Jared?
Oh, I got to go with the Telecaster thin line, like one that I own myself. So yeah, I'm definitely thin line with the wide range. With this,
You like the wide
split.
ranges, huh?
I make them, man, and I make good ones.
Yeah, this is true. This is true.
Like split the coil. I actually use the screw magnets and not just put a slot in the pole.
Do you make any with a bar magnet?
No, I don't. Nah, because the reissues come out like that. Those are really good sounding if you want a PAF sound, but if you want a true 72 sound, you'll go with the actual pole magnets that are much.
Sure.
But yeah, they're not a bad pickup either. But yeah, that's what I'd go with. I mean, the Parker Flies were really cool back in the 90s when they first came out, and you really didn't know much about guitar. I didn't back then.
Yeah.
So I just knew that they were super light and they were cool looking.
Yeah.
Back then that was my visual of them.
I understand that. There's no way I'm gonna get a Parker Fly. So I mean, this one's pretty unanimous. We've brought that up a couple times. Like, what is up with that?
It's weird. All Parker guitars are weird, but what's weird about the Parker Fly is it seemed like all my customers that had those were kind of the one-man band kind of guy that played
right.
at the Holiday Inn and
They were so light.
had the keyboard and the drum thing and the whole deal,
They later traded their Parker Flies for Variaxes.
Exactly. Which was a trade up, probably.
Well,
trade up and down at the same time.
Hey, Parker Flies were expensive too.
Oh
Yeah.
When they first came out, they definitely were.
They're crazy. Well, who knows what's up with that and whatever. And if you have one, well, fine. That's
The Ken
good.
Parker arch tops are just as weird as those Parker Flies too.
Yeah, the whole thing is, I don't get it. But anyways, well, thanks, Jared, for that one. Tony,
Yes.
could you help us out real quick?
What would you like me to do?
I would like you to, with moderate expediency.
Moderate expediency.
Todd told me earlier he wanted you to be really slow.
No,
Oh,
no,
okay.
I didn't.
Well, at this time of the show, there's a special group of people that we like to thank.
Yep.
These people really do help make the podcast possible. They help us offset a lot of costs that a lot of people don't realize are involved with a podcast.
Yes.
So if you go to patreon.com /
The Guitar Knobs.
the Guitar Knobs, there's a couple of different levels that you can participate in, and if you want to sign up to be a patron on Patreon.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's like $1, $5, $10 a month,
And even 20.
and 20 and more. And if you can afford it,
Well,
let's go with let's roll the dice.
sky's the limit, baby.
Sky's the limit. We'll put a special prize package together for you.
But the ones that we are going to discuss right now.
Yeah. The ones that we're going to discuss right now are our executive producers.
Right.
And one of the biggest benefits, in addition to all of the great T-shirts and
Barefoot buttons.
buttons and
all
stickers
the
and
stuff.
picks and you name it, there's a big package coming your way.
Yep.
But what happens, Jared?
You get to have your name read on the thing.
You get your name read on the thing.
We're going to do that right now.
And that's what we're going to do right now. So I would like to welcome, we're going to go from newest to oldest.
Yes.
Is that okay?
Yes,
Are you comfortable with that, Todd?
I am.
Okay. I just want to make sure, because sometimes you look at me funny,
Yep.
like now. So let's welcome on board Jonathan Jerusik.
Yeah, and a huge shout out to Jonathan Dudzik. He has been a supporter of the show for a very long time in ways that didn't have to do with Patreon. He's just, he's a great dude, and he's given us a lot of moral support, and we greatly appreciate it. And he's joined the Patreon club, and we couldn't be more happy.
I just talked to him today. He's a good customer of mine.
Yep.
Oh, excellent. Let's see if he needs some pick cards.
That's right.
Also, let's welcome Ken Sayers, Ken with an N.
Yep.
Corey Nigro.
Mm-hmm.
Doug Gann. Brad Partridge. Michael Van Zant. Doug Christ. Zach J. Wright. Gary Goodman and Son Beckett.
Woohoo!
Darren Gregory. Robert Marfleet. John Anglin. Chris Kearney. Or Kearney. Kearney. Sorry, Chris. Sean S. Oliver Gonzalez. John Daly. Robin Smith. Pete Marshall. Carlos Mancha. Matt Brammer. David Wolfson. Martin Cliff. And last but not least, Mr. Tom Barazin.
Yeah, man. Hey, everybody. Thank you guys so much at every single level that you are helping the show. We truly, truly thank you and appreciate you so much. Okay, Scott, where can people find you?
They can find us in Athens, Georgia at Baxendale Guitar, Baxendale Guitar on Facebook, Harmony and K _conversions on Instagram, or Scott Baxendale Music on Instagram. And our number is 706-546-1116.
Excellent.
Hey, I'd like to give your listeners a deal. Anybody that comes in my shop and say they heard about me on this show, they can get a 10% discount on any of our Harmony and K conversion guitars, and I'll give you a 20% discount on any setup work that you need on your guitar.
Wow.
That's nice.
That is fantastic.
That's practically worth the trip to Athens.
Yeah, is it just walk-ins? Is it online? Is it call-in? What does that include?
Walk-ins or call-in or online.
Okay.
If they say they mentioned you, then that's fine.
Awesome. So just, hey, everybody out there, first of all, go check out these guitars anywhere you can. All right. Then what you're going to do is you are going to get a hold of Scott at Baxendale Guitars and tell him that you want one of these guitars. And trust me, you want one of these guitars. Mention the guitar knobs and you're going to get hooked up massively. I'm really excited about that deal. I was thrilled to get you on the show because I knew our audience would really dig this. So
thanks.
Thank you so much. That is an incredibly generous offer. You've been a super great guest, and we thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you.
Tony, where can people find you?
Well, if let's say someone's looking for a custom pick guard, maybe they want to change out pickups, maybe they want to do some archtop conversion or something like that. Maybe you need a bound guard.
All right.
That's something I do. You can go to pickguardian.com. You can also see some of the projects and things I'm working on or have worked on Instagram. And that is under the handle Pick Guardian and the number 1 because some schmuck took Pick Guardian already.
Yeah.
So,
all right.
You know how
that
they
was
are.
Secretly me.
Oh.
Jared, where are you going to go?
That's why my name is Brandon Wound. So if you guys need any new pickups or new pickups that are old looking, or you need some rewinds, I'm pretty quick at that and pretty low cost. Get a hold of me, Jared, at BrandonWildPickups.com.
You mentioned you failed to mention that they sound amazing, like legitimately.
I let other people say that.
I got them in all my guitars; they're fantastic.
Thank you.
I've got a bunch.
Yeah.
Yes, and
See
so
what
does Tony.
See what I do on Instagram too. I'm always posting funny stuff that I do on there.
Yes,
Nice.
Cool stuff.
You can send me a line at todd@theguitarknobs.com or DM me on Instagram and make sure you go check our stuff out. And if you haven't subscribed to our feed on Instagram, for Pete's sakes, just hit subscribe. Just hit follow. Just do it. It's super easy.
Drop us a line with a question or a comment.
And that's how you're going to get all the killer deals that we are able to give to you guys.
Yep.
So thank you again. Massive thanks to Scott at Baxendale Guitars and for the offer that he so generously is giving to our listeners. I guess that's it, everybody. Have an awesome guitar week.
That's right.
And subscribe.
Yeah.
Well, that's it for these knobs. Please visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/theguitarknobs. Visit our website at theguitarknobs.com for all of our past episodes, 4 on the Floor blog, and other good stuff. You can connect with us on social too at our Facebook page and share your gear and stories on our Facebook group. Also, be sure to check out our Instagram at Guitar Knobs. Catch you next time.